signing these amendments. Thank you very much.
I thank 1 minute. I thank the chairman for his remarks. I thank Mr. McKeon for his leadership and willingness to work together on a difficult issue. I certainly want to acknowledge and thank my friend Jim Sensenbrenner, Congressman Sensenbrenner, who has been chairman of the committee, the Judiciary Committee, who's been a leader in this Congress, and his wife Cheryl. Cheryl's been mentioned. Cheryl, like the young man we just saw speak, Congressman Jim Langevin, have shown great courage, but also have shown that disability is not disabling, that we ought to look at the ability people have, what they can do, not what they can't do. All of us can't do certain things. I urge people to look at what people can do. And that's what this bill was about in 1990. That's what this bill is about today. And I am very pleased to be here to speak on behalf of this bill. I think this bill may well pass unanimously. And the public might conclude, therefore, that this was not contentious or difficult. It was both. Not contentious in terms of enabling those with disabilities to be fully included in our society, but how to do that. How to do that in the context of making sure that the business community could live with this, that the disabilities community could live with this, and that we did, in fact, accomplish the objectives that we intended. I want to thank as well the Chamber of Commerce, the National Association of Manufacturers, and other business groups who came together with the disability community with a common objective. Randy Johnson worked on behalf of the Chamber of Commerce. And Randy Johnson, at a press conference that was held when the Senate passed this bill just a few days ago, said that he was a staffer here in 1988, 89, and 90 when we passed the Americans with Disabilities Act. And he made the observation that he sat on the floor. He worked with the leadership on the Republican side and the Democratic side, worked particularly with my friend Steve Bartlett, Congressman Steve Bartlett from Texas, who was intimately involved in fashioning and working out the compromises necessary to overwhelmingly pass the ADA in 1990. And he said it was clear then that the intent of Congress had been misconstrued by the Supreme Court. This is Randy Johnson, Republican staffer, leader now in the Chamber of Commerce of the United States, who helped fashion this bill. And this bill really says, yes, we agree with that, in a bipartisan way. The Supreme Court misinterpreted what our intent was, and our intent was to be inclusive. Civil rights bills are intended to be interpreted broadly. Why? Because we want to make sure that every American has the benefits that America has to offer, the opportunities that America has to offer, and to empower them to help America be a better country, to bring their talents and their skills and their motivation to bear in the public and private sectors. I want to thank as well Nancy Zirkin, Andy Imperato, as I call her, my lawyer, Hy Feldblum, who's worked so hard on this for now those 20-plus years. It's been 18 years since we passed the ADA, but as Mr. Miller knows, it's been 20-plus years, 25 years really, that we've been working on getting to this point. I also want to thank Mike Peterson of HR Policy and Jerry Gillespie of the National Association of Manufacturers. There are so many people that I could spend the next 5-10 minutes mentioning just name after name after name who made this happen. I won't do that, not to diminish them in any way, but to say that this is the result of the efforts of many, not of me, but of many, not of Mr. Miller alone, or the ranking member alone, or Mr. Sensenbrenner, but many dedicated to this cause. We're here to build on the accomplishments of the landmark Disabilities Act of 1990. We wouldn't be here at all, however, without the hard work, frankly, of a very close friend of mine, former member of Congress, Tony Coelho. Tony Coelho had a vision. Tony Coelho suffers from epilepsy. There is nobody who knows Tony Coelho that thinks he's not able to do everything, anything, and all things. Tony Coelho empowered all of us to think larger, to understand how to bring about real change for those with disabilities. Tony Coelho, an epileptic, asked to leave the seminary because he had epilepsy, because the church concluded he really couldn't do the job. It was the church's loss and our gain. He made a tremendous contribution to this institution, but much more importantly, in the last some 20 years that he's not been a member of this institution, he continued to make an extraordinary contribution, not just to those with disabilities, but to our society in expanding our consciousness and inclusion. And I mentioned his name, but I also want to thank my friend Steve Bartlett. Steve Bartlett, congressman, then the mayor of Dallas, now in the private sector, but engaged in the 80s and 90s and engaged in the passage of this bill today, was extraordinarily helpful to us. In 1990, the original ADA was the product of the vision of so many. I also want to thank my former staffer, Melissa Schulman, who worked indefatigably as we passed the ADA in 1990. When the first President Bush signed the American with Disabilities Act 18 years ago, America became the world's leader on this central test of human rights. The ADA was a project in keeping with our oldest principles and founding ideals. As President Bush, the first, as I call him, put it at the signing ceremony, and I quote, "Today's legislation," he said, "brings us closer to that day when no Americans will ever again be deprived of their basic guarantee of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness." Thanks to the ADA, that day became closer on July 26, 1990. Thanks to the passage of this bill today and the signature, as Mr. Miller indicated, next week, the expected signature of the President, with hopefully the first President Bush present, tens of millions of Americans with disabilities will now enjoy even fuller rights, and the rights that we intended them to enjoy when we passed the ADA. The rights to use the same streets, theaters, restrooms, or offices, the right to prove themselves in the workplace, to succeed on their talent, and drive alone. We've accomplished much in terms of public accommodations, in terms of reasonable accommodations. I was sitting there with Michelle Stockwell, my policy director, as we watched Jim Langevin give his speech. What a wonderful accommodation he has in that chair that stands up. Weren't all of you impressed when he said, "I rise to support this legislation"? Jim is still here. He's over here. I rise. And he does rise. Why? Because he has a reasonable accommodation, which, notwithstanding the failure of his legs to work the way he would like them to work, his chair reasonably accommodates and has him rise to speak to this body as a testimony to the consciousness having been raised to make sure that a person like Jim Langevin of great ability, not disability, but of great ability, can come here, having been shot at the age of 16 inadvertently by accident, disabled, graduated from high school, graduated from college, elected to the Rhode Island House, elected to Secretary of State of his state, and now a member of this body. What a testimony to making sure that we made sure Jim Langevin could get through the door. We made sure Jim Langevin could get the kind of education he wanted and have access to that education. What a testimony to what this Congress has done, but more importantly, what so many courageous people with a disability have shown us all, that a disability is not disabling. It may rob us of a single or maybe even multiple ways that some people do things, but not of all things. Sadly, as a result of the Supreme Court's decision, we have yet to live up to our promise fully. That's what we're trying to do today. We've made progress on access. We've made progress on listening devices, a lot of progress. One of the places we haven't made the progress we wanted to was employment. So many people want to work, want to be self-sufficient, want to be enterprising, want to have the self-respect of earning their own way. but have been shut out. And the Supreme Court didn't help us. That's what this bill is about. Over the last 18 years, the court has chipped away at that promise and at Congress's clear original intent. We said we wanted broad coverage for people with disabilities and people regarded as disabled. Important phrase, regarded as disabled. What the Supreme Court really said, well, if you can make sure that your disability does not disable you, Tony Coelho takes medicine for his epilepsy. And so he functions, and if you saw him, you would say, he's functioning fine. But if I said, but I won't hire you, Tony, because you have epilepsy, the court said that was okay. Nobody on this floor believed that was the case. If he was discriminated against because he had a disability but could do the job, we said that's wrong. The court did not agree with us, and we're now changing.